Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight. So, this evening we have Bhante Suddhaso, who will be guiding us in some meditation and then sharing some words of Dhamma. So, as usual, if you have questions, feel free to type them into the live chat and we'll address them at the end of the talk. And hello so far to Adine, Denise, and Ron. And hello as well to other friends who are watching but not typing in. And hello again to Aya Vimalanyani, who is joining us, as well as Elaine, Melinda, and everyone else. So at this time, I'll pass things over to Bhante Suddhaso for this evening's meditation.
Good evening. Go ahead and get in meditation posture if you're not already. Taking a moment to check your posture, making sure that you're sitting in an upright yet relaxed position. A position that you can reasonably let your body remain in for the whole period of meditation. So optimally, a meditation position should not require any ongoing effort to maintain. It should be stable without forcefulness. So there's only a very slight effort involved in keeping the body upright. Mostly the body just stays upright because of our posture. And once you've settled into position, make a resolution to let the body remain still. The more still the body is, the easier it is to enter samadhi. Open up your awareness to encompass your entire sensory domain. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, thought, all at once, without giving preference to any particular object, without giving preference to any particular domain. Just letting the entire sensory sphere wash over you, moment after moment. Like ocean waves washing against the shore. And the shore is unmoved, unbothered. And the ocean is relentless, just as sensory impressions are relentless. The ocean is vast, just as sensory domains are vast. So we just sit peacefully, attentively, clearly knowing every moment. as the flow of sensations wash over us. Sensory impressions are harmless if left alone, harmless if allowed to flow through the mind unobstructed. But they are painful if grabbed. So, whatever arises in the mind, whatever sensory impressions come and go, we let them drift by without grabbing them, without pushing or pulling. Because we know that to get involved with any sensory impression is just getting involved with dukkha. So we just let them float past, appearing and vanishing in their own time, in their own way. Sometimes the flow of sensations is gentle. Sometimes it's violent. Sometimes it's slow and peaceful. Other times it's fast and rough. But whatever it is, we remain unmoved, just knowing without holding. There is no solid ground to be found, just the endless flow of ever changing sensation. So we let go of any desire for solid ground. We let go of any wish for a stable body, a stable mind, stable identity, and relax into the flow. Relax into knowing change. Relax into awareness of constant change. Whatever arises also ceases. So whatever arises is dukkha. We watch it arise and cease without participating, without remorse, without longing. And we let it cease without disappointment, without nostalgia. relaxing into the flow of constant change. Releasing every sensation of body, releasing every sensation of mind. full awareness, but no expectation. No resistance. relinquishing all phenomena the moment they appear without hesitation. Now you can slowly adjust your posture. If there's any soreness or tension, you can give yourself a gentle massage. And take a moment to appreciate the peacefulness of the mind.
So thank you, Bhante, for that meditation. And welcome to some more friends joining in. Jens, Kumu, Tu Win, Shadow of Label, Alicia, and Yudi. So good to see everyone. And welcome as well to all those watching but not typing anything in. So at this time, I'll pass things over to Bhante for tonight's Dhamma talk.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So the topic for this evening is a short quote from the Kaccānagotta Sutta, which is in fact my favorite sutta in the entire Pali Canon. Not one of my favorites, but actually my number one favorite. So the quote goes, Dukkhameva uppajjamanang uppajjati, dukkhaṃ nirujjamanang nirujjati. Which means when something is arising, it is just dukkha that arises. When something is ceasing, it is dukkha that ceases. Or more simply, you might say, it is only dukkha that arises and only dukkha that ceases. Only dukkha arises, only dukkha ceases. That's perhaps best. In the Pali, it's 3 words and 3 words. So in English, we can use 3 words and 3 words. Only dukkha arises, only dukkha ceases. So if y'all think the Zen masters have the whole succinct, pithy statements pinned down, they've got nothing on the Buddha. He had that figured out 2,500 years ago. So, only dukkha arises. So the first question, what arises? What is it that's arising? What is it that we call arising? What are the objects that seem to come into being? Well, there's objects of body and mind. That's one way of dividing things up. You can divide things up in terms of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought. That's another way. You can divide things up in terms of body, feeling, perception, thought, and consciousness. That's another way you can divide things up. You can divide things up in terms of internal sensation and external sensation. That's another way. You can divide things up in terms of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. That's another way. These are all just different ways of classifying phenomena, different ways of classifying experience, which in Buddhist terms is the same. So in Buddhist terms, we don't really have this thing called objective reality that a lot of people like to believe in these days. Instead, we have subjective experience, which is actually the only thing anybody has. Again, I find it incredibly bizarre that people believe in objective reality because you've never felt it, you've never experienced it. It exists only as a concept. Our actual reality is subjective experiences. Our actual reality is mental phenomena coming and going. That's our actual experience, our actual reality. So, what is arising? Well, one way of saying is that what arises is sensation. And that's accurate enough as long as one remembers that sensation also includes mental sensations. It's not just body sensations. That's an example of something that arises. And of course, we also know, as elsewhere in the suttas, it says, Yan kenchi samudaya dhammang sabbantam nirodha dhammanti. Whatever arises also ceases. Whatever has the nature of coming into being also has the nature of ceasing to exist. So another beautiful pithy statement which sums up tremendous volumes of Buddhist doctrine into a very short statement. So then that solves the second part of this, only dukkha arises, only dukkha ceases. So anything that arises also ceases. So what arises? Sensations. And those sensations cease. And as you pay close attention, you recognize that the arising and ceasing are not separate. They're inseparable, like two sides of a coin. The arising and the ceasing cannot be pulled apart. They come together. You cannot have something which arises and which does not cease. And of course, something can't cease if it hasn't already arisen. So, what arises? Physical form arises. Sensations arise. Perceptions arise. Mental phenomena arise. So thoughts and emotions. And consciousness. These are all things that arise. And they're all things that cease. And this is a process that we observe in every single moment. In every moment you observe the simultaneous arising, ceasing of phenomena. That's one way of describing the meditation practice that we just did. It's observing the simultaneous arising and ceasing of phenomena. You could also say it's the observation of emptiness, which amounts to saying the same thing. You could also say it's the observation of impermanence, which again amounts to the same thing. You could also call it silent illumination meditation, which amounts to the same thing. So just different ways of saying the same thing. But what is it that's arising? What is the nature of the things that arise? So not getting caught up in the details, because the details are insignificant. One moment what's arising is blue, and the next moment what's arising is green, and the next moment what's arising is red, and the next moment what's arising is yellow. So the details are not important. What is the shared characteristic of everything that arises? And here the Buddha gives us the answer. It's all just dukkha. All of it. It's just dukkha that arises. That's it. So even just saying that, I can feel my mind becoming calm. Because if it's just dukkha that's arising, why would we try to hold on to it? Why would we pursue it? Why would we get involved in it? If we already know it's dukkha, then the mind is already cool. The mind is already dispassionate. The mind is already equanimous. The mind is already peaceful, free of longing. And whatever arises, we already know it's just dukkha arising, so we don't move towards any new arising. But we don't move away from it either, because we know that arising is simply the nature of things. And whether there's moving towards or moving away, there is dukkha. So whatever arises, it's already dukkha. It's only dukkha. That's it. It's unsatisfying. That's it. It hurts if you grab it. But it doesn't hurt if you don't grab it. It just flows away. So since whatever arises is just dukkha arising, then there's no need to grab at anything. There's no need to try to hold on to any experience. There's no need to try to make any experience persist or last or repeat. Which again is the meditation that we were doing. One of the images that comes to mind, a metaphor for conveying silent illumination meditation, is that it's like sitting in a river. And you feel the water flowing past you, flowing over you, flowing through you, in fact. But you can't hold on to any of it. If you try to grab a handful of it, Well, that's just silly. You're just fooling yourself. The water is just flowing through your hands. You can't hold on to it. And if you try, you're just going to reap weariness and disappointment. It's not going to do you any good at all. In fact, just the opposite. So you just relax and let the water flow past, feeling it as it flows past, but not trying to hold on to any of it. A similar metaphor is it's like sitting under a waterfall. You feel the water rushing over you, but you're not holding on to any of it. You're not trying to keep it or preserve it. You just feel it flowing past you, flowing over you, sitting peacefully as it flows over you. So this is what we're doing in silent illumination meditation, is we're just letting phenomena flow over us, flow around us, flow through us, knowing everything that's flowing through us, but not holding on to any of it, not trying to grab any of it, because we know that what's coming is just dukkha, and what's leaving is just dukkha. So that also means we're not disappointed when any experience changes or ends, which is happening every single moment. No sensation persists. If something seems to persist, it's just because we're trying to hold on to it. But what's actually happening is not that the sensation is persisting, but rather that we're reifying it in our mind. But if you pay attention, you'll realize it's not the same experience moment after moment. As the moments drag by, ticking one after another, the experience is changing. It's actually not the same experience. So nothing persists. So we allow things to fall away because we know that we're not losing anything valuable. It's just dukkha that's ceasing. So we don't need to lament the ceasing of dukkha. We don't need to be disappointed at the ceasing of dukkha. We don't need to regret the ceasing of dukkha. We just know dukkha is ceasing. And a serene joy comes from that knowing. So every moment, it's just dukkha arising. So we have the serene joy of not grabbing the dukkha. And every moment, whatever is ceasing, that's just dukkha ceasing. So we have the serene joy of knowing we're not losing anything important. We're not losing anything valuable. We're not losing anything worth holding on to. So you think that tasty thought that's arising is pleasant and wonderful. No, it's just dukkha. No sense in grabbing at it. You think it's terrible that that pleasant, enjoyable sensation is fading away. No, it's just dukkha fading away. Nothing to lament. Nothing to mourn. No cause for nostalgia. So the mind comes to rest with bright clarity of knowing in the midst of this flow of phenomena, this flow of dukkha arising and ceasing. But as long as we keep still, without grabbing at any of it, without trying to run away from any of it, without lamenting any of it, then there's no problem. It's just dukkha arising and ceasing. But it has nothing to do with us because we don't give the dukkha anywhere to land. So dukkha arises and ceases within body. But the body is not who we are. It's just dukkha arising and ceasing. Dukkha arising and ceasing is the mind and all the components of mind, but that's not who we are either. That's just more dukkha arising and ceasing. It's only when you think this piece of meat is me, only then is it dukkha arising in me, dukkha arising for me. Only then is there a problem. Because you've given a target for the dukkha to strike. You've given a landing pad for it to land on. But if you know that body is just body, it's just sensations arising and ceasing, it's not me, it's not stable anyway, so it couldn't be me in the first place. There's nothing to hold on to anyway, so there's no point in even trying to hold on. Grasping is actually the most utterly ridiculous activity. Whenever you reach out to grab something, it's already vanished. There's something else there. Holding on is the most ridiculous activity. Whatever you're trying to hold on to has already disappeared. There's something else. Self-identity is also the most ridiculous activity because whatever we identify as ourself has also already disappeared and been replaced by something else. You think your body is the same body that was there a moment ago? It's not, it's completely different. Pay closer attention. You think that's your mind? You think that it's the same mind that was there a moment ago? Completely different. Pay closer attention. It's only our ridiculous belief that we have ongoing persistent existence that convinces us of that. Actual observation of reality shows nothing persisting. It only shows phenomena arising and ceasing. It only reveals dukkha arising and ceasing. So don't pick up the dukkha. And then there's no problem. There never was a problem. I think that's all I have to say. So if there's any questions, I can take some questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante, for those powerful words of Dhamma. And there are a couple questions already on YouTube. And for those of you watching on Instagram, feel free to type in your questions as well, and we'll get to those. So we have a question from Ollie, who says, does that mean then that good feelings are dukkha?
Yep. Next question.
And Yudi says, Yudi Sai, I agree that all is mental phenomena and subjective.
Mm-hmm.
But is there an object outside the mind, or is it all in my head?
Well, the Buddha said all phenomena are made by the mind. Manopo bhangama dhamma mano seta mano maya. All phenomena are made by the mind. So there is nothing outside of mind. The problem is that you identify it as your mind. That's a problem. Mind is not limited to you. Mind is simply an aspect of reality. It's an aspect of nature. The vijnana dhatu, the consciousness element, it's just an aspect of reality. And we carve out a little chunk of it and we say, well, that piece is my mind, as opposed to her mind and his mind and their minds. But actually, it's just mind. That's all. So there is nothing outside of mind. Technically, there's nothing inside mind either. Technically, there's no mind, but this is getting into a whole other talk. So technically, that's true. There's nothing outside of mind. But whatever you identify as your mind is not yours. It's just mind. It's not yours. It's just a part of reality. There's a lovely sutta where the Buddha says, monks, abandon what is not yours. And what is it that is not yours? The body is not yours. Feeling is not yours. Perception is not yours. Mental formations are not yours. Consciousness is not yours. Abandon them. Okay?
And on Instagram, Springtime Again says,
Getting there.
Who watches dukkha arise and cease?
So the Buddha would say that's not a valid question, because you're presupposing the existence of a being that is observing. So the Buddha would say that the correct answer is rather to say, under what conditions does watching occur? That would be a valid question. There's a lovely discourse in the Samyutta Nikaya called the Paguna Sutta. Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 12, I don't remember the sutta number. It's fairly early on in that book, though, so you could find it. Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 12. Paguna Sutta, where it goes like this. Someone's asking, who perceives? And the Buddha says, invalid question. The correct question would be, under what conditions is there perceiving? And so on. The person asks a number of questions like this, and the Buddha gives similar answers. So there is dukkha arising. There is the experience of dukkha arising. There is the observation of the experience of dukkha arising. But there is no persistent, ongoing entity who observes. There is observing, but no observer. Okay?
And on Instagram, also David Leon says, isn't emptiness objective reality?
This gets a little bit difficult because that's applying words, it's applying labels, which can be deceptive. There is a way of speaking in which you could say that, yes, emptiness is objective reality. But there's a risk of what's called getting stuck in emptiness, where one decides that emptiness is what's real, and that therefore phenomena are false and therefore not real. But that's not quite accurate, because emptiness and phenomena are inseparable. Phenomena are a manifestation and expression of emptiness. And emptiness is the inherent nature of all phenomena. So you can call emptiness objective reality if you like, but there's a danger there of getting caught in conceptualizing emptiness, and also a danger of rejecting phenomena. So phenomena have apparent existence. So they're not quite real, but they're not quite fake either. And emptiness cannot be defined in terms of either existing or not existing. It cannot be defined as either real or fake. So I don't personally like to get into talking about objective reality at all, because then people's minds tend to congeal. And whenever your mind congeals, then you're far from awakening. We don't want a rigid mind. We want a flexible mind. Okay?
And welcome to Miguel, Amaranta, Custom Wavelengths, Vortex as well, joining in. And Secret Spy Records says, if there wasn't any dukkha, there wouldn't be anything appearing to cease.
So you're indirectly asking about the nature of the awakened mind, because only an awakened mind does not have dukkha. So how does an awakened mind view reality? Well, that's a difficult question to answer if you're not enlightened. And it's something which the Buddha mostly avoids. The Buddha mostly avoids trying to describe the subjective experience of an awakened being. He mostly focuses on teaching how to get there, rather than trying to talk about what their internal experience is like. And I suspect one of the reasons for that is because our paradigm cannot include the experience of an awakened being. It's kind of like we're two-dimensional. And an awakened being is three-dimensional. So you tell a two-dimensional being, oh, move up. And they won't have any clue what you're talking about because they don't have that dimension. They don't have the concept of a third dimension. It's just not within their paradigm. So we relate to things in terms of objects that either exist or don't exist. We relate to things in terms of separate beings that have separate individual ongoing existence. But this is not how an awakened being relates to the world. That is not how they relate to themselves. They don't even have a concept of self to relate to. So it's completely outside of our paradigm. Okay?
And Yudi says, there's a host of animals and viruses inside the human body. Could some dukkha arising in us be from those creatures?
Don't blame others. Your dukkha is your own creation. That's both the bad news and the good news. If somebody else is creating our dukkha, then we can't do anything about it. But if we are creating our dukkha, then we have full power to stop it. So this is the simultaneously extremely bad news and extremely good news that Buddhism offers. All the dukkha you experience is your own damn fault. Which means you can stop all of it in any moment. So you can't blame anybody else for your own suffering. Nobody else. And you can stop suffering whenever you want to. Okay?
On Instagram, Springtime Again asks, what about your Buddhist identity?
Well, that one's useful as a provisional identity. Again, there's the simile of the raft. So somebody comes to a flood and they need to cross to the far shore. So they make a raft. And they make an effort on the raft, paddling with arms and legs to cross the flood. And when they get to the far shore, they discard the raft because it was just provisional. They didn't need it anymore. So while you're in the flood, while you're crossing the river, then the raft is really helpful. But all along, you know that it's just provisional, it's just temporary. It's just something that's useful for a period of time, but you know that eventually you're going to toss it aside. So it's the same. A Buddhist identity is one component of the raft. But when we attain awakening, we're going to throw it away along with everything else because it will have served its purpose and will no longer be useful to us. And in fact, to try to carry it around would just be a burden. It would not be in the nature of an awakened being. Okay?
And on Instagram, another question, this one from Ant Honey Mendoza. Is mind everything or nothing?
Well, if this is a multiple choice question, I would have to go with everything on this one. But if I was being really Buddhist, I would say both. And if I was being super Buddhist, I would say that you're missing the point entirely. But the simple answer is mind is everything. Everything is mind. That's the simple answer. Okay.
And on YouTube, Joy asks, is compassion also dukkha?
Yeah, actually it is. It is. But it's also a component of the raft. So compassion is a wholesome mind state. And producing wholesome mind states helps us to assemble a vessel that we can use to cross through samsara and attain awakening. So it's useful.
And Secret Spy Records says, if you try to follow the concept of emptiness to the end, it would be absurd.
I don't understand what you mean. Technically, everything is absurd. Yeah, maybe if you could clarify what you mean, I can help.
And on YouTube, Academia Despierta says, I like the quote, they're real, just not really real.
Anything else?
And another question from Felipe on Instagram, which may be for our monk chat tomorrow evening, is how could I overcome bad habits that bring me pain?
Monk chat. Yeah.
So, if possible, Felipe, you can join us tomorrow evening at this time for monk chat, where we'll answer more general questions about Buddhist practice. And on YouTube, Kumu says, it's a whole new way of looking at things. So true that ultimately all sankharas are dukkha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Adine says, part of me totally understands that there is doing, but no doer. Yet another part of me gets totally disoriented when I think in that way. How does one live in the world without a sense of agency?
So keep in mind that the perception of not self, the realization of not self, is actually the final step of the entire Buddhist path. So, of course, it's difficult. And if you haven't already perfected every single other element of the path, it's probably going to seem nearly impossible. So focus on everything else. Build up all the other aspects of the Buddhist path. And then you'll find that the perception of not self starts to become easier and more accessible. So of course it's difficult. This is the crown jewel. This is the pinnacle of all Buddhist practice. Anatta sanya, the perception of not self. Of course that's going to be hard. And of course that's going to seem out of reach. So you do everything else. The perception of impermanence is actually a great way of priming the mind for not self. But the perception of impermanence also relies upon strong samadhi. And strong samadhi relies upon strong morality. And morality, paradoxically, requires a certain amount of wisdom. So basically, you just pick up any part of the Buddhist path and start developing it, and then work on all the other parts of the Buddhist path that are connected with that one, which is ultimately winds up being everything. It's like a net. If there's a net spread out on the ground and you pick up one part of the net and lift, you eventually wind up picking up the whole net. So you're trying to pick up the perception of not self. That's great. Well, it brings with it every other aspect of the Buddhist path. So work on everything else, and you'll find it gets easier.
And welcome as well to Leonardo, who says thank you. And Youssef. And Youssef has a question. Can we see phenomena in terms of the five aggregates? And how can we see for ourselves that all that's of the nature to arise is also of the nature to cease?
So I did mention the five khandhas. I did mention that a couple of times as being one way that we can divide up experience. And that's a useful format that you can use from time to time. As for how to directly observe arising and ceasing, pay attention. It's happening all the time. You can't miss it. Unless you're lost in your daydreams, which, just to be perfectly honest, you probably are. Unless you're lost in your daydreams, you can't miss impermanence. It's happening all the time to everything. Pay attention. Stop dreaming of permanence and pay attention to what's actually happening. Stop fantasizing about stability. Pay attention to what's actually happening. Arising and ceasing is every single moment, every single thing. You can only miss it if you're not looking, which is why most people miss it, because they're lost in their own daydreams, in their own fantasies, in their own illusions. So of course they don't notice. So pay attention and you'll notice. Okay.
And Youssef also says that's the insight of a sotapanna, no?
Yan kinchi samudaya dhammam savantam nirodha dhammanti. Yeah. All that arises ceases. Yeah, that's one of the ways that a stream enter is defined.
And Adine says, a neuroscientist I heard recently agrees with the Buddha that we cannot perceive phenomena objectively. We necessarily co-create our reality.
Okay. Yeah. I don't pretend to know much about science, so I don't normally talk about science. I just talk about Buddhism. But it's always cute when science agrees with Buddhism, because then we can be like, yeah, we figured it out first.
And Secret Spy Record says, a Buddha's compassion is way beyond ours, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, a Buddha's compassion is, well, first off, it's developed over hundreds of lifetimes. But their compassion is perfected by the perfection of wisdom. Yeah. Anything else?
And Bhavani says, how to deal with dukkha given by old and sick parents.
So you just said something nonsensical. I'm going to rephrase that for you. How can I deal with the dukkha that I inflict on myself and blame on my old parents? That's what you're actually saying. And it starts with recognizing that you are generating your own dukkha and that you are blaming it on the fact that your parents are old. Once you acknowledge that, then you'll realize that the releasing of that dukkha is within your immediate grasp. You just have to stop. Accept the situation. Your parents are old. Well, that's the nature of beings, is they get old, they get sick, and they die. That's their nature. So here at the monastery, the monastery cat is very sick. He might be getting close to death. We're not sure. It's possible. Well, that's his nature. Why would we expect otherwise? It would be crazy to expect the cat to live forever, to always be in perfect health. That would be crazy. So why are we surprised when our parents get old and get sick? Why are we surprised when they're dying? That's the nature of all beings. It's just because we want things to be other than what they are. We crave for a fantasy world that doesn't exist. We live in a dream which has no match for reality. So we suffer. And we can stop doing that at any time, and then the dukkha will go away, just like that. Okay? Anything else?
And to clarify, Secret Spy Records said, an example of what I mean by the concept of emptiness, being absurd, is if all of this is empty, neither arising nor ceasing, then it follows that the Four Noble Truths do not exist. If the Four Noble Truths do not exist, then knowledge, abandonment, meditation, and all of this will be completely impossible.
So in emptiness, no phenomena arise and no phenomena cease. And yet, there is the apparent arising and ceasing of phenomena. So again, this is what I was saying earlier about fixating on one to the point of neglecting the other. So emptiness and phenomena are, again, like two sides of the same coin. They come together. So if you say that the fundamental nature of all things is emptiness, then you are denying the apparent reality of phenomena, which includes causality, conditionality, and it includes the path to awakening. So we can't deny the apparent existence of phenomena because clearly it's here. Clearly something's happening. And yet it has no solid substance to it. It has no persistent reality to it. It has no stickiness to it. It has no solidity to it. Which is why you can say its nature is emptiness. So don't get stuck in one or the other. If we're going to get into sectarian divides, which I mostly don't, well, do I? Anyway, sectarian stereotypes anyway. One of the stereotypes is that Theravadins get stuck in phenomena and Mahayanas get stuck in emptiness. Neither one is the correct approach. We have to see both sides of the coin. If you stick on one as being the true nature of things, then you're just sticking to samsara. Emptiness is also a part of samsara. This is something that people sometimes don't understand. Okay.
And that was the last question on either platform. But Adine says, thank you so much for the wise words. I'm learning so much about what I need to do in order to follow the path. And Leonardo also says, I thank the Buddha for teaching us that we can let awareness rest in that suffering arises without identifying with it. Selflessness is a radical, wonderful, liberating teaching. Actually, a question just popped up from Pro Trekking.
First off, just to respond to what Adine said.
Oh, sure. Mhm.
Was it Adine, the last comment?
The one about selflessness?
Yeah.
Leonardo.
Leonardo, okay. Yeah, so dukkha arises and ceases, and it's not me. It's not mine. It's not who I am. It's just dukkha arising and ceasing. So that's where that serene joy comes in. It's in knowing that the dukkha is arising, but it's not me. The dukkha is ceasing, and it's not me. This is the sense of pervasive, unshakable peace that comes from this reflection. And you said there's another question?
If all that arises is dukkha, there's nothing to hold on to, nothing to control. How do we relate to that in the context of duties of the practice, the good things?
I think I already answered that.
All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining in, for all of your questions, comments, and attention. So tomorrow morning, we'll be back at 8 a.m. New York City time with some sutta study. And then in the evening at 7:30 p.m., we'll have monk chat where you can ask further questions on this or any topic this week or anything related to Buddhism and Buddhist practice. So hopefully you can join us for either of those. And we can end tonight with 3 sadhus.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And enjoy the rest of your evening.